Hey,
Morning, Eric.
morning, morning, bright and early. Not that early. It's 10. Um, After just waking up, I feel like I'm ready to talk about Superman.
Superman! Eric is back from a very long trip to the East Coast, which had many different parts to it. So even though it was ostensibly a vacation, there was just a lot of logistics, a lot of moving parts. And so this morning, before he returned back to his home, we decided to record an episode of about Superman, the latest Superman that just came out in the theaters, written and directed by James Gunn. Was it written by James Gunn? I think it was. I think it was written by James Gunn,
Yeah,
which we saw actually together. We saw it when we were on the East Coast together in Pennsylvania, and yeah, we have a lot to talk about. In particular, this is normally, I think, when we do these podcasts, these episodes, I think that you and I are so often in agreement about things. And not only that, but sometimes Eric's observations really push me to think about something that I hadn't thought of before, and that I really appreciate. And I actually think the reverse might be true, right?
sure.
So it's kind of
Well, I'm gonna try and convince you.
no,
That's
you're not going to convince me. We're going to go into the unknown of a movie that we vehemently, I'm going to spoiler, we vehemently disagree about. It's not often that we have different feelings about something, and this is more often than not, Eric and I are on the same page. So, number one, this Superman was made during a period after which James Gunn, who is the director of Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy for Marvel, and, in that role, he was also a consultant to the Avengers movies. Like he played a big role in the Guardians and how they joined the Avengers universe, how they showed up in the Avengers universe. But James Gunn in subsequent years became the head of DC Studios. And so he was seen as a big departure, taking over from the Zack Snyder dominated era, which was also started by Chris Nolan with his Batman series. And so it was Christopher Nolan and then Zack Snyder. And then DC Studios was not doing well. They did not have many hits. And so James Gunn came on board as head of DC Studios, and now he's directed The Suicide Squad, a remake, which I was pretty meh about, very meh about actually. I thought it was well made, but I thought it was really, chaotic and ultimately didn't add up to much. And then he headed up this new Superman, and the new Superman. There was obviously a lot of backstory about Henry Cavill not being able to continue on as Superman. So he was told, no, thank you. After making an appearance in Shazam, they were like, oh, no, we're not going to have you come on board after all. We're not going to have you continue after all. And so there's a lot of angst about that. And then, but James Gunn explained that he was making a younger Superman. He needed a younger, like it's not an origin story, but at an interesting point in Superman's trajectory. It's 3 years after he has become Superman. He's well established at the Daily Planet, and he's well established in it. Well, not well established, but he's in a relationship already with Lois Lane, who's the only one who knows his secret identity. And so the backstory is that basically he's wrestling with being Superman. It's an existential sort of arc. And he is challenged both by his first defeat and also by the supervillain, Lex Luthor, who is doing everything possible to besmirch his reputation, to really like make Superman the most hated criminal ever. So it felt particularly timely to me in terms of how quickly people's images can be distorted and erased and the reality changed through social media. So I think that there was a lot of that in there. There were certainly a lot of references to crazy like dictators who want nothing, who will lie and cheat and be incredibly corrupt just to retain power. So there's a lot of references to our current political situation in there. And so the other interesting point I'll make, which is one of the things I um, initially was really excited about, was that the movie uses quite a few nuggets from the original score from John Williams, the iconic movie composer from Star Wars and Jurassic Park and all those big ones. So, oh, and also there's a dog, Crypto the dog, who is one of the best parts of the movie. And the new Superman is played by David Corenswet. Lex Luthor is played by Nicholas Hoult, and Lois Lane is played by Rachel Brosnahan. Brosnahan. I'm sure that Eric is dying to start with all of
Why
these.
don't we start with what we liked about the movie?
Okay,
Because as much as I did hate it, I recognize that I'm in the minority. I'd like to,
you're not
stick.
in the minority.
I absolutely am in the
Well,
minority.
no, there's been articles written about the fact that critics either love it or hate it. So
Okay.
there's like a war going on
All
between
right.
movie critics
All right.
about the
Well,
ending.
within my our personal circle of people that watch this movie, I'm
Yeah,
in the
we saw
minority.
it with my niece and
Um,
and Annie,
so we might,
my daughter.
yes, so we might as well lead with what we liked about it.
Okay,
I liked very few things, but
it's a short list.
yeah, but the things I liked, probably the biggest thing,
I want to stand further back.
yeah, the biggest thing was probably the dog Crypto. I think, um, despite being a completely CGI dog, um, I think at least I don't recall any scene where it looked real. Um, yeah, it was it was animated with so much love, and the scenes that it was in brought a lot of humor and like sen sentimentality to Superman's character, that he has to take care of this overpowered, mutt. And so that was really funny. And also like the way they played on the tropes of, Crypto being a dog, like chasing after balls and like um tearing shit up is like very funny. Um and then along with characters I liked, Mr. Terrific was a huge part in this movie that any scene he was in, he was magnetic. I think
Ha ha ha.
yeah. Nice, nice. There's one fight scene that he's in that's just amazing. And
Is that the bubble one?
yes, yes, and I don't know what song that was playing, but it really fit that whole vibe. And and also it's choreographed amazingly. Like he really commands so much presence. And then his dialogue is fucking hilarious. The way he kind of just is plays it very straight. And you could tell that he cares about, what's going on in the plot and all that, but he plays like he does it. And
Yeah.
and it's like very
Yeah, he did that really well.
I think he actually showed up.
Yeah, he's very deadpan and cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can
Um
I say something about that scene, which
yeah.
is that scene that Eric loved, the fight scene, the action sequence. It pulls one of the very few original songs used in the movie. And
Yeah.
actually, that is if I could think of a signature move of James Gunn,
That is.
especially from Guardian,
Yeah.
he marries an action sequence or a really moving scene to the perfect song.
Yeah.
And he's talked a lot about this in interviews about how he never has problems getting the licensing for these incredibly iconic songs.
Yeah.
So he says that he always asks the studio, "This is my list of songs, like Mr. Blue Sky by Electric Light
Yeah.
Orchestra." Like he'll use songs like that, and he says that he just stands his ground in terms of the studio getting the licensing for them. However, I just want to say that because that scene was so good and so James Gunn signature, it made me long for more of it,
Yeah.
and I actually feel like he was really fumbling with that. He was like sort of fumbling with how do I avoid this not being a cliche and how do I integrate my previous signature style of these iconic songs married so well to the beats of a scene. How do I marry that with this new world that this new Superman that I'm trying to launch, you
Yeah.
know? So I think that he was struggling with how do I create a new chapter of James Gunn as visionary and director versus how do I, not, how do I avoid being a cliche,
Yeah.
with that music? But at the same time, it showcased what his core strength, which he's so good
Yeah,
at it.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
I didn't like Guardians 3 either, but that also had a music action sequence, multiple that I liked.
Yes, he's
And
good at that. He's
yeah,
really, really good at that.
and Guardians was specifically set up to include that because of Peter Quill's connection to music through his
Yeah,
mother,
that's right.
and
And there
that's
was no
that's the
such
narrative reason why we have all these licensed
correct.
tracks. And I feel like there's none of that
No.
in Superman, which teeters on the cliche, like
Yeah. And
and
if you think about it, if you think about the cliche thing,
yeah,
or the if you think about that seems to me to be a tough problem to solve, which is how do you
yeah,
pick elements of the old John Williams iconic score, which I really, really love. I love dun da dun da 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 da. I love that score.
hmm
And so how do you marry the old school John Williams triumphant stirring thing with your signature, which is to be these very 70s, 60s coded songs,
hmm
that have a lightheartedness to them. I just think it's a really hard problem to solve, and I don't think he solved it.
yeah.
I don't think he solved it.
Among, that being somewhat of a strength of James Gunn and this and Superman, I did find that the humor could be enjoyable for some of it. For Superman, I it sometimes it wasn't intentional. Sometimes like the humor would not hit. But other times it
Quite
would hit.
often, yeah.
Yeah, but other times it would hit either because he was trying to be funny and it was funny, or because what was happening was so like egregious that it was just ridiculously funny. Like I have to say the brutalism of some of the fights and some of like the choreography is so shocking. It's shockingly hilarious, because I think he definitely was leaning into the quality of DC that's a little nastier when it comes to action and
Darker,
darker and whatever, like
more
for
violent.
yeah. And but as much as it didn't really feel super purposeful to me, it was funny. It was funny to watch. What else would you say you liked about the movie?
There were two things that really stood out that made it more like it than not. More like it than I disliked it. So number one, the emotional stakes and beat of the movie really hit home in the last third of the movie. So Superman, I felt like it was a story. I haven't thought this out thoroughly, but I feel like it was a story about ego. I feel like it was a story about when you believe that you're right and you're always doing the right thing, so that you get so committed on a path, and then to the point where you argue with your girlfriend about who's right, that you're doing the right thing, and then you argue with, you feel like you're always in the right, and then you're dealt this crushing blow, and then do you learn from that failure and pick yourself up and accept more collaboration and help? So my point is that the storyline to me was compelling, and that Superman was really convinced that he was right. Lex Luthor was really convinced that he was right. Lois Lane was really convinced, and certainly the dictators and corrupt people that Lex Luthor were working with were also convinced that they were right. And so it shows to me that it was very contemporary for me, because all those themes are so relevant today with our online discourse. Like everybody thinks that they're freaking right, and every discussion becomes super binary, super polarized, and super, like the discourse becomes really charged. So the fact that Superman was not agonized by his choice until he was defeated, and then he finally realized that the only thing that he could fall back on was to be good and kind, and that he had a core essence, about helping other people and being good and kind, and also accepting help. Like, for example, remember he had that conflict where he couldn't be in two places at the same time. And so he actually accepted help from the corporate justice gang. That was sort of a funny bit. And so he accepted help from the corporate justice gang to go and solve an international incident, an international conflict, while he himself was trying to, prevent the world from blowing up essentially. And so those themes really resonated for me. And then at the same time, I was thinking a lot about the contrast with Ryan Coogler, because I think that Ryan Coogler in Black Panther and in Sinners, I think his signature are those quiet, intimate, emotional moments. And I think that James Gunn is really uneven at that. So I think that he only did that well in the last third of the movie where you really started to get the sense that these people are connected and they care about each other and that they're willing to help each other, or there's at least room for that. But I don't think that I think he has a lot to learn about emotionally important scenes, because I think that the scene that appeared in the trailer or in one of the advance clips that was released, where he and Lois are having an argument about his actions to prevent an international dispute, I thought that that scene was terribly lit, terribly paced. The dialogue went on forever. It was so overly expository and also so repetitive. Like they just kept on saying the same thing again and again and again, and it went on forever, you know. And I'm thinking, what director? And I'm like, oh, James Gunn would have a problem with this. I think he does better at emotions when they glancingly connect and feel true than he does when he dives deep into a scene and lets the emotions breathe and come alive. So I think that this movie made really showed off what he's not good at and what he may never be good at, you know. But the other thing I'll just say, the thing that I love the most about the film, other than the last third where I felt that things came together and the themes really came together, this is where cultural context comes in. So Eric and I have talked on previous episodes, you and I have talked about how cultural context, like what you, the audience member, brings to the audience, brings to the movie, really matters. And so for me, this movie brought that feeling I had about Superman that was developed with the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. So those movies were produced by Alexander and Ilya Salkind, who also did the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers, which were my favorite movies. And so those movies with Christopher Reeve, the Superman movies and also the Three Musketeer movies, were really, really well done for capturing both the time and the place in which Superman or the Musketeers, but Superman in this case, Superman mattered. But they also incorporated lighthearted humor so well. Like there were all these little jokes. There's a really great joke in the first Superman with Christopher Reeves, where he's looking for the first time he has to transform into Superman, and he goes and looks for a phone booth, and he can't find a standing phone booth. He can only find like payphones attached to the wall, and so the Salkind Superman movies really brought to life this idea of Superman as a big, handsome, earnest dork, like really, really big, handsome, earnest dork. And then the Bryan Singer movie with Routh, which never went anywhere, he did like a Christopher Reeve impression. So there's a history of Supermen who really lean into the earnestness of the character, and to the point where you really, as an audience member, say, do I this that to me is the essence of who Superman is. I think he's a big corn-fed from Iowa or Nebraska, wherever they're from. I think he's a big corn-fed Midwestern dork with really good intentions, you know? And so whether or not you believe that, and whether I buy into that as Superman the character, and so therefore what I'm looking for in the movies is whether or not they embody that earnestness, that dorkiness, that I'm doing good, I'm Superman, you know, and also I'm a little bit dumb and I'm a little bit like I'm not nearly as crafty or clever and cool as Batman. I'm just a really powerful guy who's earnest and wants to be dorky about it. And so for me, this movie was a really effective moving forward of that tradition of Superman from the Salkin movies directed by Richard Donner, who went on to do the Lethal Weapon movies, from the Christopher Reeve movies, then to the Brandon Routh, Bryan Singer movie, and now to this James Gunn movie. So that's why I was left liking it more than not, because I was left with this feeling of this is Superman. This is who he is. This is true to the character. The movie around it had some serious flaws, like serious, serious flaws. But at this, and I think that James Gunn is really got to struggle to find his voice on these things. But at the same time, he captured something that felt right to me about Superman, and that's why I liked it.
I will say probably the biggest thing I bring to this movie in terms of cultural understanding is nothing. Because literally I don't that's my biggest fault with this movie is that I don't give a shit about Superman.
Yeah,
Like
he doesn't.
I don't
I get it.
I've never read the comics. I've never seen any other movie about Superman. I actually don't even think I've seen Man of Steel front to back. Like that would be the only movie I would have
Wow.
seen. I've seen big chunks of it, but I've never seen like the full thing. I have seen like Batman v Superman
Khaled, no.
and Justice League. Yeah, those are the only like Zack Snyder ones I've seen. But I've never seen the older.
Lame.
Never seen the older Supermans. I still have yet to get to some of the animated Justice League stuff and Batman stuff. I've seen Young Justice and I've seen the Justice League movies. So my understanding of Superman is completely grounded in just those things, and it's not very strong. I don't really like have very strong feelings about Superman. On top of that, I'm bringing a huge fatigue of superhero
Hero movies,
movies,
yes.
and the superhero genre, which I do love so much, but I'm getting fatigued of bad iterations of or just um, ones that have bad filmmaking, in my opinion.
Yeah, I
And
mean, we talked about this because Eric was so crushed that he didn't like the movie. By the way, on a fundamental level, that just sucks. It
yeah,
sucks to be in a theater, especially with the people who you went to see the movie with. We're all enjoying it. Everyone around you seems to be enjoying it, and then you get this sort of chorus or groundswell of people who really like the movie, and
yeah,
you're sitting there having a miserable time and wondering, am I just like, what's wrong with me?
yeah,
Like, why am I not like buying into this?
yeah,
And so we talked about this a little bit. I felt really bad for Eric because it really does suck to be disappointed also. And our greatest disappointments lately have been coming with superhero movies, particularly Marvel, because we were so invested. And so I talked to Eric about this, and you can talk a little bit more about this, but my hypothesis was that you're so much harder on all of the different aspects of what goes into making a movie. Like you're on the technical stuff, on the pacing, on the clunkiness, on the score, that you react so much more negatively to those things that your disappointment, your expectations are higher because it's a superhero movie and you want to love them. But then when you don't love them and you're disappointed, your disappointment is so much keener and sharper, especially on the technical flaw. So,
absolutely,
yeah, so
yeah.
why don't you talk about some of the technical things that really drove you nuts?
Thank you for that introduction into this point, which I agree, because that is absolutely the case. It feels like since this is such an established genre, so many iterations of heroes and things have come out, and James Gunn has already put out great superhero movies, which because I still love the first two Guardians. It feels like we should know how to edit and shoot a film. We should know how to edit a film. We should know how to shoot a film. And I feel like Superman was terribly edited and terribly shot.
I agree,
And one of my friends,
especially for the first half, at least.
yeah, and one of my friends believes
Beautifully shot.
believes it was terribly colored also, which like I
Yes,
kind of agree with.
so gray.
Because it's so gray, so blue, it's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
feels feels like mush.
Your friend makes a good point, I think,
Yeah.
because Zack Snyder did everything with this blue filter or like very blue sharp.
Yeah.
But in that case, I bet the contrast should have been
It's
sharper.
sharp.
That's
It's
right.
crisp.
Okay, whereas
Yeah, it's clear and there's
this one
all
was muddy.
and this one was muddy. And on top of that, at least Zack Snyder can work with a DP who knows how to frame shots. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And like use the right lenses.
I love
Okay.
when Eric goes on
Th
Film Geek.
this is not that.
Oh, by the
I'm
way,
sorry.
for the people out in America, listen to
America.
the podcast or
Yeah.
wherever, what does DP stand for?
Oh, director of photography.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Which is kind of the
Mom, mom.
same thing as a cinematographer
Yes,
and an
exactly.
art director.
No, no,
Okay.
art director is different.
Okay, thanks.
Art
You
director
should explain these
Art
things.
director has to do with the design of the movie, like whether it's props, costume, or
Oh,
not
nice.
costume. Costumes is its own thing, but art director oversees those things.
Yay!
Um,
Something.
but cinematographer, director of photography is just for shooting the camera and the shots.
Yes.
And
Zack Snyder knew how to do that.
yeah, Zack Snyder at least had somebody who was established, I feel like, in that. I mean, I know, and I don't want to.
Defend.
It sucks because I think it was so poorly done in Superman, but ultimately I'm shitting on these people who are established in the industry. But I'm sorry, it just sucked. It has the issue we were talking about with Doctor Strange about like muddy VFX,
Yes.
too. Like it's VFX galore in this movie. First, I want to talk about the camera work because what the fuck are we doing? We're using a wide angle lens for every single shot, every single dialogue scene, and they're also using this shitty ass Steadicam like to cover every scene, and it's like shaky a lot of the time. They were doing one scene where they were doing like it was like some planning phase, and they were doing like a circular like oh everybody's planning like we're in motion,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
it was so shaky. It was like, is somebody gonna put a stabilizer on this? They're going like this the whole time.
I'm
And
nodding my head because Eric is right now explaining things like why they were muddy or confusing or poorly shot. So it's not like I know what he's about to say because I am actually appreciating his
yeah,
technical knowledge.
like all so many shots I felt like the camera was like right here
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
character.
yeah.
It's like, can we back up? Can we zoom in? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because I need to be able to see this person. I need to be able to understand them. Instead, we're like I think they probably did that because they want people to be right there. You know, they want people to be next to the action, next
It was
like
not a good visual choice.
feeling like they're a part of it. But to me, it read so like messy and just unplanned. It was like we're only seeing things because we just happen to catch it, you know, instead
It's
of
weird to me now that you say this. I mean, the visual thing might bother me even more if I went and watched it a second time. But like I remember when the opening scene, with Superman in the Arctic or wherever he is, Antarctica, I immediately felt this feeling of wanting to be more beautiful or more stark or stunning. Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
the the it looks just as muddy and less high def as the Christopher Reeve movies were the ones that first set up those ice palaces, and then Ice Palace, and then it was continued into the Brandon Routh movie, and it was apparently that ice headquarters was all started by a crystal that Superman had from Krypton, right? But anyway, my point is that the first movie, if you watch the first movie on the Christopher Reeve movie, it looks really muddy and kind of, and then you think, wow, filmmaking. I was thinking this when watching the new one. I was like, filmmaking has, I think it's advanced to the point where you can actually make this ice headquarters look really cool. Like you can make the snow like sparkle. You could, you know what I mean? Like you can make it far more dazzling. And I was like, oh, this doesn't look that good. That's what,
I wasn't into that whole layer. I
yeah,
mean, it's
the
just like
layer.
the, it just wasn't
Oh, the
like
layer.
that visually compelling.
Yes,
And inside it, it was like they were making it like a fun little like oh he watches videos of his parents
yes,
and the robots are kind of quirky. The robots were throwing me off entirely because the one robot was making a lot of comments about how he can't feel emotions, but he would feel emotion in the next sentence
yes,
with what he said,
yeah,
which I understand maybe was the point,
yeah.
but like it was so stupid. Anyways, so camera work I just didn't like, and I know like people will commend the flying scenes and the fighting stuff, which um, I can see the technical work in that and what they did to make it feel that way. But it just didn't. It just felt chaotic and not in a good way. It felt like a little kid doing this because he could, which
Yes.
which most people I think like because they like James Gunn and they like what he's doing with the character of Superman because it's in line with what they feel like is Superman's character. But for me, I wasn't connected um to him at all from the get-go, and that just lost me like for the rest of the movie, you know.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. But another thing that lost me was the editing because what the fuck are we doing? Like we- I on top of the shitty camera work, it's like we're going between different angles that make no like sense as to why we're seeing this when we're seeing it, you know. They used a lot of time the shot of a shot of a character's side profile. Like it would just
Interesting.
they would be talking about some random thing and then they cut to a side profile of Lois like talk I'm like I don't know why we're seeing this part of Lois right now. We're in the conversation. We should be doing normal conversation like rule of 180 like people talking to each other all this stuff. There was one scene in particular that frustrated or just threw me off completely when he he finds out his parents said some awful shit in the message and he comes back and there's some I keep forgetting. Oh, there's like an imp in the sky that the heroes are fighting that he just takes a break from and just goes to his apartment. See, this is part of
It is his apartment.
one the confusion. Like he flies and he's like all sad, and he enters the
He
apartment.
flies and he's all
Yeah, he's very quietly. He very quietly enters his apartment,
I think this
and
should be a tagline for this episode. He flies and he's all sad.
since we've only been introduced to one apartment so far, I'm thinking it's Lois's apartment or it's his apartment. I don't know. But it's just this one shot of him and he like sits down and he's like all sad. And then all of a sudden Lois talks and then we cut and we just see her sitting in the kitchen or something. I'm like, I didn't feel like we entered into this scene. Actually, that's the issue with the editing. That the main issue. Like, I didn't feel like we entered and exited scenes.
Establishing. Yeah.
Yes, establishing scene. It's like this happens, and it's like, why are you expecting me to just buy into? I mean, everybody else buys into it because oh my God, I love what they're doing with Superman right now. But for me, it's like we need to be entering and exiting, okay? And I didn't feel that way I didn't feel that way about most of the scenes. Like, I'm not thinking back. I know so many people would disagree with this, but there's no scenes for me that I would go back to and like I need to watch this because this is a good scene. You know, like I'm thinking about like how many views scenes have on like how many movie clips are popular on YouTube, like just for because being that one scene where this thing happened. Um, I don't get that sensation from Superman. I'm not like, oh, this is the scene where Superman does this because personally, I just don't give a shit. So,
I would watch the final scene again, and I would watch the final sequence again because I really love the role that Crypto played in that. And then I would also watch the action scene with Mr. Terrific that you and I
mhm.
discussed. But anyway, I think that your issues are real. Like I completely agree with them. And I think it was really badly done and badly executed in so many ways. I will also point out one thing that drove me crazy, which is that, again, we talked about this earlier about the mix of the old John Williams triumphant score and then James Gunn's signature style. But one of the things that drove me absolutely crazy about Thunderbolts asterisk was that there were so many scenes of dialogue which had music playing in the background, nothing
Yeah,
music playing in the background, and that drove me crazy. But in this one, there was just really odd insertion of music
yeah,
at like either too late or not enough or whatever. So that extended argument with Lois and Clark about the ethics of the international intervention, it was silent for so long. The scene went on for so long, and so all you could just hear was this awkward dialogue, like awkward exposition that was just repetitive, repetitive. And then it took way too long to get to the, oh, is this actually going to damage their relationship? And when that finally you heard the emotional music cue you that there's actually more at stake here than just arguing about, that there actually was a personal relationship at stake. But I was waiting forever for those emotional beats. I really think that the difference between sound design, score, and then those signature themes or songs that James Gunn has always pulled, I really think that that was not worked out well at
mm,
all.
yeah.
And so there were many, many things wrong with this movie, and yet I ended up liking it more than
I will
before.
say for about the score, like I feel like the only time it somewhat worked was when he talks to his dad at his house. Like
Yes, that's right. I agree with
that
you.
conversation
Yes,
with the music
yes,
was probably it was the first time and the only time I felt like this actually syncs up like correctly.
yes,
And it fits with film language and just in general. Like
yes,
because it was also the most simply shot scene. You know how you have the shot of his dad, shot of Superman, and they're both in the frame. And then there's also the shot from the back where they hug each other, and
yeah.
that's just very compelling, and that's very well done. But it does not carry like for the whole movie. Um, and you know, it's funny, like a lot of the issues I was having, especially with the dialogue and the fucking stupid exposition. It's like such a Marvel trope now to just explain everything in these. Okay, also the war between Baradia and whatever Jambori or something.
Yes.
Fucking, oh, we do not see that at all. It's just explained in this little scrawl in the beginning, and it's like we don't see it until like way later in the movie, like what that actually means. Like and Lois and Superman just talk about it for a while. And that's just overly expositional. And so,
Oh, but by the way, that whole war and international incident and Lex Luthor's corruption and involvement going on. I really feel like that was poorly handled.
mhm,
Like when Lois Lane was discovering all of the facts, it should feel really thrilling. It should feel there should be this hushed buildup of suspense. Like you should be pulling a little bit from Black Bag or a heist movie or like some type, or even, any of the great journalism movies like Spotlight, So there's this quiet unfolding, but it's barely given any room to breathe, and then when she finds out what's really going on, you're like, eh.
yeah.
Yeah, no
Um,
build up.
and I think it's funny that some of these issues I was having with the editing and exposition, dialogue, all this stuff. Um, I was being reminiscent of movies that I had the same issues with. One of them was Blue Beetle, which was one of the latest superhero movies that I hated.
Yeah.
Um, and because that was like the dialogue was so stupid, and I was not compelled or interested in any of the characters, and it felt very. like corporate and shitty, you know. And then also I liked the latest Batman with Robert Pattinson, but I had huge issues, if you remember me talking about that, with the dialogue and how expositional it was. Also, what I was reminded of about Batman was that in Batman, they watch the news so many times. In Superman, why are we watching the news over and over again? Why can't we just see the characters behaving and doing the and do like actual things happening? Why do we have to stop everything just to watch TV for a second? Because it's so lazy, I feel like. And
I actually don't agree.
I know you don't agree, and I know that it's portraying the media as being the media, or as our cultural understanding of the media, and also how opinions change so quickly,
It's
and
the echo chamber.
the echo chamber. For me, if we did it way too many times, and we also, I know that it's supposed to convey how the media actually is when it's like when people just change their minds like that, like oh, Superman was sent here to fucking enslave us, like fuck him, like and everybody's like instantly on that narrative.
I know.
I get that that's what they're communicating. It felt lazy
And
and
overdone.
overdone to me. Like and also like I can't believe I'm shocked that things are bad when they're blaming Superman and all this stuff like oh the media is wrong. But all of a sudden when they get on the right narrative of Superman's a hero, like we just accept it. It's like okay, now the media's on the right side. Like thank God, Like that's what happened because in the ending like when everything's wrapping up it's like oh yay the media's on our side now. It's like and again we're watching the news to see that happen. Versus like I think
That rings true to me.
I know. Versus when in like the first Avengers, when we watched the news after the incident, like it's very clear that it's an incident. Like people are discussing what just happened, like because so much of New York was destroyed, and obviously anchors are going on and talking about that. But there's also people talking about hope and like and people being interviewed and saying my life was saved, and that's what I care. That this is like the second time I reference that. Anyways, this is reminding me of Batman and Blue Beetle, and coincidentally, the editors of Superman, who are not the same editors as Guardians, the first two Guardians, which I like, one of the editors worked on Blue Beetle or edited Blue Beetle, and one of the editors edited Batman. It's crazy.
That is
I
crazy.
and uh,
They suck.
yeah, and the guy who edited Blue Beetle also did Deadpool 2, which is a movie I like, but I mean, even Deadpool 2, I can remember being somewhat like loose in terms of like its storytelling, even though I loved it. But again, they're comparable works that they've worked on. It just like reads as films with issues, like, and it tells me, I feel like that this is stuff that could have been decided in the editing room, like that could have been fixed in the editing room, and
Yeah.
like with the right direction um could have been fixed. And it just makes me wonder like how did it work with Guardians? Like was he given really competent, storytellers like in these fields of like dark photography and editing that like it fixed a lot of James Gunn's initial issues
Yeah.
and then he just gets to take all the credit for it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
no, I think that the best directors and the best producers too, I think that they know when a team is working and they don't want to, I think they know when a team is working and they really like to work with the same people throughout films, but which is not good for diversity or opening up opportunities unless you do it right to begin with. But at the same time, I think that there's just this fundamental instinct about what works and what doesn't work in terms of all the different roles on a film, like all the different jobs on a film. So I think that you're incredibly astute at picking up on the editing, the editors for the bad movies versus the editors for the good movies. And it's actually for people like us who pay attention to these technical details, it's actually something that we're not going to forgive very easily in terms of the doubts that we're going to have about the future ones. So, we had huge issues with Daniel Destin's choice of composer and how he used the score in Shang-Chi. We did not like the music or the score, or how it was done at all. It was so non-momentous. So then when they got all excited about announcing that he's going to be the director of one of the next Avengers, that immediately, boop, 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 it immediately ticks me, like my enthusiasm down for the new Avengers, not to mention the hole that Marvel finds itself in. But you want people to actually pick really capable. Ryan Coogler works with the same cinematographers, same like same composer, Ludovic, what's his face, and so on Sinners, and so. my point is that because I feel like I don't know if I trust Ryan Coogler's next Marvel movie because there's going to be a whole corporate machine trying to interfere with all of his artistic choices. But I am going to invest in an original movie from Ryan Coogler because I know he's going to pick people, the editor, the composer, all that actually really resonate, you
Yeah.
know. And so James Gunn might have remember, James Gunn made a huge shift over from Marvel to DC. Like he was almost fired from Marvel as a director because he had some very problematic tweets. And then Disney rehired him to finish out the Guardian series, and also basically it was like a public forgiveness. You know, it was a public forgiveness. And then James Gunn takes this role as head of DC Studios and also directing, you know, films. And he may be working with a totally different cast of characters and a completely different, like, have very different corporate constraints and a different talent pool to draw from. But at the same time, his own ability to quality control those things, you know, I trust Denis Villeneuve to pick the right cinematographer. I trust him to pick the right editor. I also have heard so much about the processes of directors that I admire when they're very collaborative with their production designers, you know, with their composers, like when it feels like a really strong partnership and collaboration. And then you hear about the directors who think that they are effing right about everything, you know, and or they're so beleaguered or pulled in a million different directions that they just don't make the right choices.
Yeah.
So I really feel like your issues with the editing and the poor visuals and everything that made you hate the movie, I feel like it's absolutely 100% valid.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to agree with you as we talked just about at the beginning, because I think that when a movie has so many issues and you can't wholly love it and you also don't wholly hate it, I think that you then decide if you're in the glass half empty, half full thing, you know? So I actually don't know if we disagreed or agreed about our feelings about Thunderbolts because we were both left with this feeling like there's a lot that was done that we liked about that movie, but ultimately we were just like it was okay. You know, it's just okay. And so I think that with this movie, because of my cultural context that I brought to it, and because I thought that they were true to Superman, I ended up liking it more than I did not like it, you know? And so I think, and it's fine that you're in the glass half empty phase because you have very legitimate reasons to do it. But for me, I'd rather Superman be around than not. You know, I even liked the Henry Cavill interpretation of it. Okay, I mean, I think that Superman's really noble, and I think that he's a symbol for hope. And it was so interesting to hear the Superman in this latest movie really question himself in terms of his role and his state and like what is his purpose. It's so funny because Dad and I were just having a conversation about purpose related to my current work status, which is not working. And so Dad was bringing us some really good points about what kind of purpose do you need to exist in your life, to carry out your life. Some people need a great big, like bold mission, and some people need just exist in happiness and contentment every day. And so I think that in respect to Superman's purpose and his role, you know, in the comics and lore and all the themes that were being brought up, I'm actually just really glad that this movie came out, you know. And I also tend to root for James Gunn. You know, I do root for him. I love the first two Guardians movies. And I was amazed at the Guardians movies at how messy and chaotic they were, but yet I was amazed that James Gunn pulled through the story in both of those movies. Um, as well as he did because the production design felt so overblown. The everything felt so overblown and big, like a giant amusement park or a funhouse spectacle. And so I was sitting there during the first Guardians as my senses were being assaulted by color and music, you know, and characters. And I was sitting there thinking, God, I don't know if he can pull this off. And then by the end of Guardians, I was like, okay, he kind of pulled that off. You know, I think it's because his both Guardians 1 and Guardian 2, and I don't know about this Guardians 3 because Eric is kind of waving me off Guardians 3 nonstop. And so, but the first two Guardians, the emotional climaxes were so beautiful in both of those films. So the emotional climax in the first Guardians of Groot sacrificing himself to protect everybody, you know, that was incredible. And then in the second Guardians, of both Yondu sacrificing himself and the funeral for Yondu by the Ravagers will forever live in my head as some of the most memorable sequences and really, really emotional. So James Gunn really pulled it off in the first two Guardians, in my opinion. Didn't love the Suicide Squad and liked Superman more than the Suicide Squad because it did hit some emotional beats for me. So
Yeah, people are taking this new movie as an opportunity to shit on Zack Snyder again,
yes,
which I think is obviously fair because Zack Snyder interpreted Superman in a way that people wholeheartedly disagreed with,
yeah,
and also some problematic people, toxic fanboys, wholeheartedly agreed with,
yes.
which creates this whole discussion online. And I definitely don't condemn shitting on Zack Snyder because he um introduced this look at DC and Superman as like very dark and violent
It was really Christopher Nolan, but yes.
and yes,
The Dark Knight is truly the beginning of the dark
yeah,
phase, and Zack Snyder went so dour and he really double and triple down on that darkness.
yeah, and he did, and in ways that were so stupid too.
Yes, so
So
stupid.
so stupid. But it sucks that I'm gonna defend him a little bit because I think he had at least and I like he had an idea that he stuck to, and that all his creative decisions pointed towards, which was stupid, but it's consistent, you know. And I didn't feel Superman was consistent, and it was consistently sloppy, if anything.
It was
Um,
he's happy.
and
He mad.
my
He really mad.
yes, my understanding also it also fits closer to my understanding of DC, which is not everybody's understanding. Everybody's under like to people, James Gunn's Superman is a breath of fresh air for those who grew up on the comics and know the corny cheesiness of it.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
it's not my understanding because my understanding of DC is that serious, dark sort of element. Even the animated stuff, even Young Justice and the animated movies that I've seen are not cheesy. They're not
They're
cheesy
not the
and
animated,
stupid.
yeah.
They're very serious.
Yeah, the
Um,
animated Justice League movies, which I think are on HBO, and then the Justice League, the Young Justice series that you and I watched together are great.
yeah.
They're great.
And from my perspective, it's
They're
like
not cheesy at all. They're
um,
quite violent though.
I liked that Zack Snyder would interpret Superman as what he is, which is like a walking nuke, who like has the power to do anything, and giving him that much power is very conflicting. And giving the Justice League that much power is that conflicting. That's how you feel in those movies because you're conflicted on whether like they're idolized heroes or they're just people who make a bunch of mistakes and like end up changing the course of reality, you know, almost selfishly. So, or they have the decision. Also, the storylines of Superman being controlled to be doing bad things is like something that's super interesting to me because that's entirely possible. Um, and for introducing Superman into these world conflicts that are very similar to what's going on right now, like it felt um, too childish, too
Crude?
crude of a depiction, in my opinion.
Mm.
But I know that everybody feels otherwise because what he is doing is he cares about people and he saves people. Which, to Superman's credit of this movie, he does save a lot of people. That's pretty great. Like, you know, I was complaining about how superheroes don't save people nowadays, but there were a lot of scenes where he would save people.
Scenes where he saved
Yeah.
people.
Um,
Okay, fine. I'll give you that one, Superman.
Yeah, but even in that scenario, I'm like, how did everybody know Superman saved them when the Justice Gang was the one who stopped the war uh, from happening, and they didn't see the whole battle was unless they did, I guess, with Superman and the Rift, and battling the clone Superman. Like nobody saw that. Like so, how do they so easily credit Superman with that? You know, I guess he stopped Lex, you know, which is like a big deal. Oh, that's another thing too. Lex Luthor's depiction in earlier things I've seen, like he's way more conniving and evil and corporate in his like he plays it coy that he like hates Superman. That's even though
In what? And you mean in the animated one?
yes, in the animated ones, he's like behind the scenes, um, orchestrating like these things against Superman, while also doing evil shit like controlling countries and money, getting money and all this stuff. Um, but this one, it was cartoonishly, like I hate Superman and I will bring Superman down. It's like good for, anybody who likes the simple cartoonish villain of the week. But to me, it was also stupid. And like,
That to me, by the way, was an interesting callback to again to the Christopher Reeve films because in the Christopher Reeve films, Lex Luthor is played by Gene Hackman, who was one of the all-time great actors. I mean, like a legend
mm,
of an actor. And he played Lex Luthor as really evil, but more opportunistic. And he just wanted to he gathered an entourage around him of kind of idiots or sort of bumbling people, but they followed him because he could compel them with his personality to follow them, even though he had all these evil genius plans.
yeah,
And then in the Brandon Routh film, it was played by Kevin Spacey, who also I thought did a really good job of like conveying that I'm just out to make a buck. So to me, Nicholas Hoult playing a much younger version of Lex Luthor. Number one, the Lex Luthor character in both the Christopher Reeve film and the Brandon Routh one, they are very Trump coded, which is how does this person amass so many followers and have so much charisma when to me he seems like such a buffoon? It's so obvious that he's a buffoon. And the only answer that you can come up with is, well, the rest of us, there are just a lot of stupid people who will follow a buffoon.
yeah,
If they have even a modicum of charisma, there are a lot of stupid people who will believe anything. And so Nicholas Hoult, I think, played Lex Luthor more obsessed with being loved in the public, which again to me is very Trump coded.
yeah,
Honestly, this series of comics and the storyline, they're all very sort of Trump coded. You
The
know.
last thing I want to say was I don't think Superman and Lois's relationship was like really grounded in anything.
Hmm.
Um, the Lois and the other journalist guy who was trying to get information from that girl who's crazy, the ex-girlfriend.
Yeah,
Um, Lois and that guy had more chemistry than Superman
that's what
did with
everybody. I've
Lois.
read that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said about that dialogue scene where he's being interviewed, I absolutely hated it, and it showcased all the issues with pacing and
Yes.
editing and camera work in that one scene, and that's supposed to be the scene where we're seeing their relationship.
Yes.
But it was also they were so at odds, and she was doing the corporate like journalistic standards kind of practice in that scene, which also made me hate her.
Yeah.
And then Superman just had the worst, most like the most basic responses to them too, where he's like, I was saving people." So again, this has to do with um, starting off. You lost me. You lost me when you started. So how are you supposed to carry me through this whole thing if I am lost at the beginning, you know?
Yeah, I
Um,
I I agree with you to a certain extent. I don't think that there is a great deal of chemistry between the two of them, and that was a function of script and it was a function of all the editing and all the issues we've discussed. I actually like them more individually in the movie than I did
yeah.
together.
It's
And so,
yeah, and because I do think she was actually a decent character, like because she was the one trying to get the Justice Gang to like save Superman,
yes,
and that was honestly good that she was doing that
yeah,
and like that and it made things move along and
yeah.
because she was the one who had actual fire to like do this.
I find myself in all the Superman movies that I've seen ranking Superman and Lois more individually than I do as a couple. So, but in the first Christopher Reeves films, I actually thought the pairing worked really well. Margot Kidder was a force of nature as Lois Lane. She was so tough. It was clearly like set in the early 80s or late 70s, whatever it was, when she had to be as tough as she was in order to be the kind of journalist that she wanted to be. And so it was really fun to watch somebody who was that tough and that ballsy to utterly crumple and be disarmed by Superman. And
Mm.
Superman was so gracious and polite to her that he clearly was attracted to her too, but she just would fall apart be very vulnerable and confused every time she was around Superman, which was awfully adorable to see.
Yeah.
And then whatchamacallit, Brandon Routh and Kate Bosworth. It was Kate Bosworth, the one who got to famous in Blue Crush, who played Lois Lane. She was meh, and Brandon Routh was a Christopher Reeve copy. And then in this, Henry Cav, I thought that Amy Adams was a phenomenal Lois Lane. I loved her, and she was a great, great Lois Lane. And Henry Cavill was okay with her, but the pairing didn't really work because he's a little bit stoic.
Yeah.
In general, I liked David Cornsweet very much. Annie and I have a little bit of a crush on David Cornsweet because I just thought he really filled the part, even though his acting was a little overdone is what I would say. A little overdone and wooden. And then I was okay on Rachel Brosnahan, but she has a huge following. There were so many people who ahead of this movie felt that she was the right choice. Like they were worried that it was going to be all about the dog, Crypto, and nothing about anything else. And I actually think that there were a lot of people who are like, "Oh, I feel so much better now that I know that she's the Lois Lane and she's going to embody it," you know? So overall, I am sad that you didn't like it more, and I actually think you need to go. Did you like last night's movie?
Uh, oh, yeah.
Okay, I need you to have more positive movie watching experiences. But then you also saw Star Wars: A New Hope, correct?
So, yeah, right
I
after
feel like you need an antidote to get
well, yeah,
over your.
exactly. I mean, right after I watched Superman, I watched the first Star Wars, just
Yeah,
like as a refresher.
yeah,
And my God, like it just felt refreshing to watch a movie that was well edited,
I know, and that movie
well
really holds
paced.
up.
Yes, it so holds up. And
Yeah, I saw that in 1977.
yeah.
When it came out in the theaters.
And I just like miss when characters held enough weight, you know?
Hmm.
Like all the characters in Superman to me just felt like gimmicks. Like the Justice Gang was just a gimmick squad. You know, even Mr. Terrific, who I loved, was just like, I don't care about any of this shit. I'm just doing my job. You know.
Right.
And then you obviously had fucking Guy who had this shitty ass haircut and like was the comic relief. Um, and it just felt like it wasn't grounded in something real. You know.
Yeah. I don't know
And
if this is editing, Eric,
yeah,
but regarding the first Star Wars, that whole thing about the score and the beats and the matching the action and the dialogue like perfectly, I can't actually think of a better example. When Luke says that means, if they found the Jabba's or whatever they called, then that means that they trace the droids back to home. And he races, and then you see him racing across the sand. And when he sees that his aunt and uncle have perished, there's this scene where Luke looks away like this,
yeah, yeah,
and he goes, and then the Star Wars theme is playing, and it goes da 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 da, and you're just like, oh my
yeah.
God.
I mean,
So
that's
those moments were missing from
yeah,
Superman.
yes,
You
yes.
so needed that perfect marriage of beats and music and then oh, it
I
was just
need
missing.
I need time with these characters to see how they really feel and see who they really are.
Yes.
And instead in Superman we were focused on what was happening and
Oh,
how the
that's a
characters
great way to put it.
were reacting to that.
Right.
Everything is react content.
I know, but remember in A New Hope, that scene that I just described took place in like the first quarter of the movie. So my point is that somehow A New Hope got to that point
Yeah,
about showing, how can I say that that scene showed who Luke is, that he genuinely cared about his aunt and uncle, even though he so wanted to leave that farm, right?
yeah.
But it showed that he was now committed to his path with Obi-Wan
Yeah.
Kenobi,
And
right?
yeah, the story structure was so clear.
Yes.
Like I always struggle to see where the first act ends and where the second act begins. Star Wars is the clearest example of where that's happening. And Superman, I'm not able to just find honestly, I know you're able to know what the story's about and all that, but I don't know. I really don't know what the story is trying to say.
Yeah.
Like, is it about Superman like saving people and stopping Lex Luthor? Is it about um because the actual um conflict that happens within him is only when the parent tape comes out and it reveals that they said some fuck shit like in the tape. And he has to grapple with that. Like that's kind of the only thing that he struggles with. I know he gets defeated in the beginning and he has to like But that's in the first second of the movie that he gets defeated.
Yeah, we don't actually see it
Yeah, we don't see it, and it's
except
like,
on recorded
yeah.
footage.
So what, like, and Superman's supposed to be this all-powerful being. Like, if that was like an inciting incident, where he's defeated for the first time, like that
Yeah.
would make more sense
Yeah.
than what actually
Yeah.
happened.
All right. Well, I think we should wrap this up because I think we actually have done
Yes.
I think we've done a great job of covering this ground about why you hated it and
Hmm.
why I liked it more than I disliked it,
Hmm.
and I actually think that we're gonna, I mean, I think we keep on hearing that the world is sick of superheroes or superhero movies, that they're sick of it. And I think that there's an element of truth to that statement or that take, that people are just have so much superhero fatigue. And I also don't think that the studios are helping any. Like, I think that I agree with the thing that Marvel just pumped out way too many TV shows, and that DC Studios has not quite gotten the tone right or the direction right. And so but, but there's nothing, how can I say this? The superhero stories and characters were so important to me as a child, and therefore the kernel of hope within me that they will make a good superhero movie, um, it will live forever. It will be there forever. I will always have I will always have a modicum of hope or excitement, even though I have none for Fantastic Four. I just want to be clear about that. But anyway, I will always be open to a superhero movie that's good, and as much as the studios are messing up, as much as this corporate control is sort of saying, no, 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 we have to keep on pumping out more of this shit, and we don't care about whether or not it's good, and we're going to keep on trying all these experiments, but whatever. I think that the fatigue is real. I think that the problems are real, but these characters are important to me. These universes are important to me. And I liked at least that Superman tried to get Superman right, and that's why I ended it. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's where I'll end. And any last thoughts?
And obviously, I obviously need to familiarize myself more with Superman,
Yeah.
because people, we're definitely praising how cheesy and
I think you should watch Man of Steel from beginning to end.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
actually worth it. I
yeah,
think it's very enjoyable.
yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely envy people. It like Lex Luthor. I'm very envious of people who find the hope and find the story and the messaging in in this latest iteration. I think I mean I'll just mention it just because it is a huge topic, but everybody's saying how woke the movie is, and I think that's a good thing. Like, or I mean, in terms of what specifically what they were addressing, very good, great. And I'm glad people got the right kind of messages out of it. But I I just expected more. I
Yeah.
expected something more serious.
Yeah.
And even in cheesiness, in comedy, you can always be serious. You can always be grounded in something real. And while most people saw that for Superman, I just didn't. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, because I love you, I hope that you have fewer disappointments.
Because
So,
I love you too, I hope you keep articulating where I might have missteps.
yeah. Well, anyway, I love you, Eric.
Love you too.
And it was great seeing you for the last week.
Yeah.
And now he goes back to home, and I return to my grieving mother. I'm kidding. I love that we can continue to do this podcast together, even when we're together and apart, even
Yeah.
when we're apart.
Me
So
too.
anyway, all right. Thank you, everybody. If you're still
Thanks.
listening, I hope, and I know that people really just watch the clips and not the whole podcast episode, but I would, for one, be really interested in hearing your take on both Eric's point of views and perspectives and my point perspective. And even though it feels like we agreed more than we disagreed, actually, the fact that we still landed in such different places is intriguing to me and
Yeah,
interesting to me.
absolutely.
All right, thanks for listening if
Yeah.
you still are.